So welcome, welcome,
Fabulous.
welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for popping on joining us for this conversation. This is part three. This is the business and leadership edition of this Sacred Soul series, Soul Contract series. So tongue twister. Still haven't gotten it yet. Third week. We'll see how we do a week four or day four. But we are here with the amazing Kim Arneson, who is an intuitive coach, business coach. She helps you take your business from six figures, five figures, whatever, wherever you start to multi six figures. So she has been doing this for a very long time. I'll let you, tell your little thing. But just to get people started. And we also have my spiritual mentor, my kombucha mama. Like, I come from her in a lot of ways. Nikki Novo. She is the owner, founder, president, goddess of her company, Nikki Novo Co. She's also a published author twice, and just like killing it in the intuitive game. She's literally the being of which many of my soul sisters have been birthed. So, Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are and how business and entrepreneurship came into your life?
Sure. So I am a conscious business and growth mentor. Essentially, my most empowered clients that I serve that like have the most success in my world are individuals who are already at around the six-figure mark, and I take them to multi six figures. We do a mix of both strategy and structure, masculine energy, all healthy masculine energy, mixed with the energetics, the feminine approach, this intuitive nature, what's alive and what wants to be born through us. And I kind of marry those together. My coach today just referred to me. She's like, "You're just like the woo meets the strategy. Like that's your superpower." And I was like, yes, that makes perfect sense. That is me. And so that's what I do currently. Business and entrepreneurship, though, truth be told, I went to college to become an elementary education teacher. This is why I'm so good at mapping out offers and making sure that our clients are actually getting results at certain benchmarks and indicators and all sorts of things. And after college, I literally could not find a job. It was like right after the 2008 crash. And so I couldn't find a teaching position. And I was hired as a preschool teacher. And in 1 year, I became the director of the school. And it was a not for profit school. So I literally took a dying school that was making $80,000 a year. And in year one, I took them to $225,000. And so that is when I was immersed into business at the ripe old age of 22 years old. And I did that for 11 years. And then I had like the deepest spiritual awakening when I had to lay myself off from that career when COVID happened. I pivoted, and then I went into spiritual life coaching thinking like, okay, this is my specialty. And I did that. And then once I had pretty immediate success with that, I was like, oh, wait a minute, no, Kim, let's sit back and realize what your specialty actually is and helping those that have a different specialty. This is my genius. And so I love to infuse my genius in those that have like true roots in coaching and in healing and in expansion and all of the things. So that's a little bit about me and my journey. And here I am. So thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Nikki, please.
Thank you so much for having me, Abby. And Kim, it was so nice to hear about your
Yes.
background. So cool and so beautiful. I'm always like trying to push my 19-year-old to like start a Montessori school. Like I guess like I have this like dream in me that like I don't want to start the school, but I would like somebody to
Yeah.
start like a full school. And like my daughter's like, I'm smarter than that. No, thank you. I'm not gonna chain myself to whatever. So anyways, I love that story. Hi everybody. I am Nikki Novo, and like what an honor to be like what is that? What is it in the kombucha? It's called the SCOBY. The
I
SCOBY.
have no idea
Yes, it's
what a
called
home
because
plant
Benny
is, but
makes.
like,
Yes, because Benny makes kombucha, my husband. So I know it's like the SCOBY or like the starter dough from like sourdough. Like that's literally like what I am. I love that.
yes.
Thank you. Um, so I'm master intuitive and spiritual mentor, most known for my soul readings, which is a reading I developed about 10 years ago. And yeah, really turned into kind of a sold out. I have over 1,500 people on my wait list to get readings with me, which is like still an honor, and blown away by that. I created a pretty popular course in the program in the spiritual world called Soul Reading Method, where people where I birth and help birth beautiful people like Abby and a lot of amazing healers that I'm so proud of. It originally called Soul Teacher, and then turned into Soul Reading Method. And yeah, I've done a few bodies of work. My background is I was a publicist in the film industry for a while, and then I moved into being an editor. So I was an editor at like MSN and Condé Nast and all these kind of big places. Had my spiritual awakening after being dumped by a guy that I thought I was going to marry, and like I needed to see a psychic, and that psychic like changed my life. And then just really started off in the blogging world, doing self-help writing, spiritual writing. My first body of work, as I like to call it, was really about dating through a spiritual lens. And that was my first book, which is called The Final Swipe. And then I moved more into the intuitive, more metaphysical, spirit guides, reading energy, got really like geeky and wizardy about all that kind of stuff, which is where soul reading was birthed from. And then I also have a third body of work, which is really about living intuitively, which is called Soul-Led Living. I just released that book in the summer, and I have a popular podcast called Soul-Led Living with Nikki. And there's also a business edition in case anybody's interested. On Thursdays, I talk about business. So I believe that I'm super geeky about the work, although like I have a lot of Cancer energy. My South Node is in Capricorn, so I've been running businesses for many lifetimes. My family is Cuban, and pretty much all Cubans are entrepreneurs because that's like how you get by over there. And my father is a physician, but I grew up watching him run his own practice. So a lot of me kind of intuitively knowing what to do with a spiritual practice was really inspired by the do's and the don'ts that my dad did. And I think that's part of like kind of what made me very successful as a practitioner, and then ultimately like learned how to scale the practitioner business. But I do believe practitioners should start off with bodies of work. So that's why I talk about bodies of work, because I do move. I've had a few in my career, and I think that's part of like what makes a practitioner successful, and ultimately can grow to be more of that like online spiritual teacher, which is definitely where I'm at. So I'm really grateful to be here and excited to answer any questions that come through.
Yay. So we're gonna just dive in. I have a question for each of you, and I'm super excited to see how you guys feel about it. The question, pretty simple. Do you feel like you're a trailblazer? Nikki, can we start with you?
Yeah, oh my gosh, that question, of course. Yes, I definitely, I wrote about that actually a lot in my most recent book, in Soul-Led Living. And I think that's what's really hard about the work that we do. Like, there's not really a blueprint. I think the world is changing so much. So it's hard to kind of try to follow anybody ahead of you. Even if you want to, it's like some days that you're like, yes, please give me like a blueprint. There's like nothing really available right now. And I think we're really coming from a place now of like following what our soul is really calling us to do, which is going to be unique. There might be definitely expanders, like people that kind of like inspire you. But I think we're still in this, we're moving into this place where we really got to do it our own way. And definitely, a trailblazer in my own family, right? Like I come from a family of doctors. Because that's why I resonate with Abby and like the work that she comes from, because that's like the world I grew up in. My brothers, my sister-in-laws, my dad, they're all doctors. So definitely trailblazing, but kind of still being a healer, but doing it a different way. And I don't know, I think that's like the only way to do it these days.
What for you really like sticks out for you in your business, for why that is? Like, what is it that you feel like you're doing differently? Because let's be honest, like a lot of people I think want to be trailblazers. Because number one, I don't think they understand it. They don't understand like how hard it is. They don't understand what that entails, the sacrifice, the pain, the loneliness that comes with being a trailblazer. So they have this like idealized thought in their mind of like, I want to be the first. And they don't understand how hard being the first is. But I think they also don't understand that you can be a trailblazer in like small ways, like that you could be doing something in your business that maybe it's your entire business that's brand new. Maybe it's how you market, maybe it's how you actually do your work, but that doesn't, it's just a piece of you that is, and it's not the whole of you that is. So do you feel like you fit into one of those categories? Do you feel like you're a trailblazer because you break those categories and there's a third one that I'm missing?
Yeah, I mean, to me, trailblazer is like really following your own path. And I think, if you think about trails, like there might be a trail like right next to mine that looks very similar, but I'm just taking a few different turns. So I think we're still kind of on the same land, being birthed from the same place. I didn't invent the psychic industry. Like the psychic industry, like I said, one of the first, I had a psychic reading, although I was raised Catholic and super afraid of any sort of psychic reading. I met a psychic woman who did a reading on me, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I got hooked, and I went to a bunch of readings. So this industry and this world has always existed. And I think what is more trailblazing about me is that I was like, all right, guys, we can't like be doing readings for $50 on a plastic chair in back of like an alley, because that's where I would get readings. Like in Miami, you would go to the Santera, and it was like somewhere in Hialeah, and you're like in a back alley getting a reading for $50. And I was like, I really think this is important work. And I would say like, it's amazing. It's crazy sometimes that I have this wait list and I charge a lot, and I really feel like what I did was I professionalized an industry that wasn't, or I was part of it, because obviously I'm not the only one, but I was part of professionalizing an industry that has always existed, but brought it into the forefront and said like, hey, this is like a worthy investment. I think we've all been doing that as healers lately, that these have been practices that have been around forever, but they were practices that were done, in back alleys, dark mat, kind of seen as witch work, all that kind of stuff. And collectively, we've brought it to the light and started to charge accordingly. So I would say that that's like a big part of the trailblazing, and then trailblazing in my family, right? Like I was raised to obviously be a professional. And it was very scary for me to be like, I'm going to leave this like media career that was very flashy, and I kept climbing the ladder, not become a doctor, not marry a doctor, right? I married another entrepreneur. And I think you can be a trailblazer in your own family, which is definitely tricky because you look like you're doing a very strange thing until it works. I had this one good girlfriend who is a creator of a really big workout company in Miami. And when I needed help, I mean, it's always important to have other entrepreneurs that are trailblazing, but they're ahead of you, right? It's like you guys are, walking side by side. And I was like, listen, I'm struggling, whatever, here at the business. And she's like, I'm like, I feel like a crazy person. Like what I'm doing is not really working. And I don't even know why I'm talking about spirit guides. Like I'm literally a fashion and beauty editor. This is so strange. And she's like, Nikki, listen, she's like, if you're not doing something crazy and people are not making fun of you, like you're really not doing anything. And she's like, I won't wait until the day everybody starts like reaching out to you and asking you for your crazy shit. She's like, I used to invite people to come dance and like wear high heels and do these like twerking moves, and like nobody wanted to come. And now, of course, now that I'm a big deal and that I'm sold out, like people are interested. And that does eventually happen. And that is hard, because you do feel like a crazy person when you're doing something that has like never been done before, or at least never been done in that way. So you're trailblazing, but there's definitely people trailblazing alongside of you. So I don't think you're like, you don't have to be like completely alone, and it's important to have those people in your backpack for sure.
Yeah. Community being a huge deal pretty much anywhere, right? Kim, what about you? Do you feel like you're a trailblazer?
I do. In a variety of ways though. And I love like Nikki's comments about family trailblazing, because truthfully, like that's where I recognized I was a trailblazer first. It wasn't outside of anything else. It was just in the way. And I'm a human design reflector. So like quite literally my entire life, I have been a little different. And so I've always felt outside of the norm, right? And so even within my family dynamic, I was like, I love you all. Like, I quite love you all, but like, none of you are doing anything I want to do, or like the path you're following doesn't make sense for me. It's just not landing. And so for me, like, even like, think about it, like my first career at 22 years old to become a director of a preschool, that was a large, a large preschool in a very affluent area. I had to like automatically become this person that was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna turn this preschool into the hot spot in this area. Like, it's happening no matter what. Come hell or high water, we're doing it. And we did it, right? We actualized that to existence, manifested it literally like that, and it was amazing. But now, like, the trailblazing work that I feel like I'm doing, and this is just like my own truth, is I feel like this coaching industry, if we don't get a handle on focusing on how we serve our people, that's a big component of the work that I do with my people, is deepening their relationship to their work in the first place, and then grounding it. I always say, like, we're not playing star tennis with our messaging and marketing. You can play tennis, you can play star tennis, but it's got to be on planet Earth, which means that it just has to land with your ideal client. Like, your ideal client has to understand what you're talking about. Otherwise, it's going to be an uphill battle. And so for me, I think that this industry, as beautiful as it is, like, I quite literally love every inch of the healing and the self-help and the coach industry. Like, I'm here for it all. But also, if we don't have evidence that we can support our people and that we can get people results, and if we don't have evidence that we're truly serving our people, what are we doing? Right? And so, like, that's the space for me where I see a lot of individuals who came into this space because there's a sexy little lucrative note that is hidden inside of all of it, both in the spiritual community and both in the coaching industry. One, if you just believe and you trust your soul and, like, you don't have to do anything, you're going to become a millionaire. Like, that's it. Like, God's source universe is just going to drop it into your lap. Like, you don't have to do anything. That is literally a TikTok I watched before I became a spiritual life coach. Okay. So that one, I don't like that. Two, the other side to that coin is recognizing that there's a lot of flashiness in the coaching industry. I'm watching people on the daily hit $100,000 months. I'm watching people hit 8 figures, 9 figures, and they're selling the way they built their business to newbie entrepreneurs, which those don't connect. What they're doing at that level does not work for this human at this level. And yes, it is our responsibility as conscious beings to be able to discern through content to go, is this advice for me? Like, is this actually going to push the needle in my business, in my life? Or maybe does that come further down the line? Yes, that's up to us, but also it is up to you as a business owner to have clear intentions and clear messaging that this is the work that is meant for this type of individual, so that your people, I use the term win, so that your people win in your world. Like, that to me is why we came into this period. Like, I came into coaching / healing at first because I wanted to serve people. I wanted to help people. I wanted people to have real life transformations. And what I was finding is that when my messaging was so, like, vague and so open and so fluffy, like, it was, I'm going to say it from this way, it was like literally rooted in, like, just feminine energy, period. Okay. Like, that's what it was. I was calling in a lot of individuals who, truth be told, were not at a level that were ready to win in my world. They didn't build up that consistency muscle in themselves, or that self-trust muscle. And so no matter what we were doing yet, they just weren't at the level quite yet. That is my responsibility to clean up, because I want to make sure that everybody that comes into my world, every exchange that I have with money now, it's always out of pleasure and not out of pressure, to where I know I back that person because they back themselves 110%. I know I can help that person because we've had that conversation and enough dialogue to go, yes, I know the level that you're at. I know what we need to do. I know where we can move. And in addition to that, there's a lot of questions I need to ask you, because I need you to find this out too. I need you to uncover it. I need you to see what your process is. I need you to tell me how you get your people results and how you serve them. And so it's this beautiful little dance. And to me, there's not many people in the coaching industry, especially from a business coaching lens, that is talking about results. The reason as to why is because a lot of coaches are not getting their people results. And that is the truth. Point blank, end of story. And so for me, as a trailblazer in this space, yeah, I'm creating a movement of coaches and healers who are 100% like, no, bitch, I know how to get people results. Let's go. Let's do this. Like, I 100% back my stuff. And so because of that, yeah, I'm like, come on in. Let's do it. Let's do it together. Let's join this movement of, yes, Nicole, mic drop. Yes. Let's join this movement where we are all results driven together, where we all can back our work at such a deep level, and that's when we switch. And I talk a lot about masculine and feminine. Like, that's where I have a very feminine based sales approach. I don't hard sell anymore, because I let my content, I let my conviction, I let my, what I know to be true about my business live at the forefront in my message. And then I literally like kick back and I'm like, here's the door. It's open. If you want that support, come on in. I'm ready. And that's all that has to happen. And so for me, it's an entirely different way than what a good chunk of the business coaches, especially feminine energetic business coaches, how they talk about business in the first place. So that trailblazing energy is absolutely here in this industry. But it started with, truth be told, like being the black sheep. I've been a black sheep my whole life, and it's cool. It's okay. It sucks sometimes. It's hard, you know, like, and they say, what do they say? Like, they say it's always lonely at the top, right? I mean, it's not that it's lonely, because I put myself in circles of people who are exactly where I'm at, or below me, or beneath me, or wherever the hell they are. They're in this land. So it's like supporting yourself with a network of individuals that are in this arena together. Then it's not lonely. But in my personal life, I don't know any other entrepreneurs. Nobody in my family is doing this. I do come from a really long line of, when you brought up like the Catholic religious background, Nikki, I do come from a really long line of priests and nuns. So I do think that that is quite like some of my energetic components and intuitiveness and reading energy. I'm like, oh, okay, that's where that comes from. That's where that stems from. And I do have some entrepreneurs like in removed families, but nobody I ever grew up with, nobody I surrounded myself with. So really, truly, from that trailblazing-esque, I'm the first one that I've witnessed in myself and in my life to go this route. But now I see that there's millions of us literally together doing this. And that to me is like, that's what lights a fire under my butt, is because there's so many of us together that are creating this paradigm shift. We're literally shifting the way that people exchange money, how they work, what's possible for them. And that to me is what activates me most. Like, could you literally, I know this is so corny, but I don't care. Could you imagine a world where like literally we all have geniuses and innate strengths and we all just exchange money for it together, and that's how we all work? Like, what? Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Teach me. Yes, I'm in. So that's
Right.
that.
I love that how you were talking about like the trailblazing within like honesty and alignment within your business. And I think this really harkens back to what Nikki, you were talking about how part of what you do is in your like trailblazing aspect is the professionalism of the intuitive community. I absolutely can say 100% that yes, like if somebody asked me what is Nikki like known for, I would have been like, well, yeah, she like birds intuitives, but like for me, especially at this point in my life and in my business, the more important thing I feel like of how, like, why I'm so glad that I came from you in that way is the fact that you did professionally. I don't charge what those like dark room beaded curtain people do. And I speak out about it because of what you taught me and what you teach your students when we ask you guys, when we as a group ask you about business and what it means to be in this. For you, I would assume this was very important, yes? And that's why you decided to do that? Or was there something outside of just its importance that really told you, you know what, we need to move this along. We can't be doing this anymore that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think Thank you, Abby, for like that. It's really beautiful. And I'm like so proud of all the work that you're doing. So thank you for, the shout out. But I think a lot of it comes from like, I went to school, like I studied, I like had a very professional career. So it wasn't like I was gonna like leave this very professional media career to just do these like random readings. Like I knew I was like gonna do it and do it well. And I don't know, I don't think I was thinking like get results, but like how you were saying, Kim, but like I just knew that I was going to dot my I's and like cross my T's basically. So I expected that from myself. And like I trained myself. I worked, like really hard, like just kind of really working like as an athlete and tinkering this one thing that I was doing and tinkering it. And that was it was interesting because I didn't come into my business like knowing that I was going to do readings. That came later. I came into the business like as a blogger, and I would teach workshops, and I was teaching blogging, like was one of the first things that I taught in like 2008, 2010. Um and it was funny because I think in the beginning of business, I was like throwing a bunch of things at the wall and seeing what would stick, kind of this idea of like, oh, whatever I'm meant to do will like take off, right? And I think we're taught that a bunch for sure. And I guess I was like in that place. And then ultimately I stumbled upon this concept of like doing readings because I was downloading the information by accident in meditation, and I was seeing clients, and I started doing readings on clients. And it was the first thing in my business that caught my attention enough to want to be like really good at it. So it was kind of like the first thing I didn't give up on, because I had done like courses and I had taught other things. I even wrote, like, I tried writing this like book, which was like so horrible. It was like one of the first. So I was just doing a bunch of little things to figure out how this vision that I had of this career, like how it was going to work. Like I had an idea of like what I was meant to be, but I had no idea how I was going to get there. So I threw like a bunch of things at the wall to see what would stick. And I mean, chicken or the egg, like, I mean, we can debate whether I was meant to do like these other things. And I'm not going to really like debate that, but I would say that like I found readings, it was something I like, it caught my attention. It was like a lever that just like kept my focus. And once it kept my focus, somewhere along that process, I realized like, oh, things work in business when you tinker with it enough to make a really great product. Like something switched in my head that I was like, I kept thinking that everything I was doing like just didn't work because it didn't work. And it was like, no, like it's not working because you're like not fixing it. Like you're not taking the feedback, you're not making it, like you're not engineering it basically. Like the product is not good enough because you're just saying like, look, this should be good enough. Like the first rendition should be good enough for you to buy the course, or the first rendition of my book should be good enough for you to read the book. And it's like, none of it was good enough. It was my first trial. So when those things didn't work, I just assumed it was like the thing I was doing, or worse, me, and I would give up on them. But then the readings came along, and it, like I said, caught my attention, and I started to tweak it. And when I started to, what I teach in Soul Reading Method today is like hours and hours. I've read over 800 people. So it's like hours and hours of like doing the same. It's kind of like hours and hours of doing the same recipe. So it's like my cake is bomb, but only because I have like meticulously measured how much sugar and how much flour or whatever to make this perfect cake. So I find like kind of that I found that to be like so crazy and like such a miracle. And I think that by doing that, I professionalized a product that had already existed in the world, right? Like readings had existed. It was a product or a service, whatever you want to call it. But nobody had tinkered with it to the amount that I did, because if you think of the nature of intuition, it's like the idea that was sold to us for many years was that some people had it and some people didn't, and that it was natural. So therefore, you have a natural talent. You shouldn't have to work on it. And I think, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this. Like he writes about who was he talking about? Tiger Woods, right? Like everybody's like, oh, Tiger Woods, like this amazing athlete. And a lot of people look at amazing athletes and think like, oh, just born with a gift. And he, really was like, no, if you look at how many hours he logged in, that's what took him from natural talent to like, oh my gosh, like miracle. So that was a game changer for me. And I knew that because I had a natural talent for writing. And then I was like kind of forced into being an editor, and I was uh, mentored a lot, and people like trained me. And I saw for the first time, I was like, I'm like this natural talent. Now I'm like good at it. So that's really what happened with the readings. Like I was, you know, you come in with like natural intuitive gifts, you come in with natural healing gifts. And where you really tip over is when you see yourself as an athlete. Like think that you're playing Little League with all your other friends. Only like one or two of the people you start off with in Little League are actually going to go pro. And that, like, I was like, I'm going to go pro. So I took like a natural talent and gifts. And what's been so cool about my career is like, I've trained so many intuitives. And what has been the coolest thing is to see that you don't even need that much natural talent. Like some of my best students were not my most naturally gifted. They were the ones that were focused enough to like really show up and tweak and try and like, you know, never give up, and just kind of like, because they're interested in it enough. I don't judge anybody who does like decide like, oh, you know, I don't want to put the hours into the readings, because I'm like, okay, if it interests you enough, like it'll catch your attention and you'll keep doing it. So I don't blame, because I've given up on a lot of things. I don't think we're supposed to stick through with everything. But I thought that was like really, really cool. So because I did that, and then of course I never thought I had an intuition that I was going to like teach young spiritual teachers one day, but it definitely, I've shared this story before, but it definitely came way faster than I thought I was ready for. When I started to teach young intuitives, because they were coming my way, because they were like, they recognized that I was kind of like the first person that had natural intuition, had a method for it, could deliver the same results. So I think for practitioners, anybody who's watching, I really highly believe in finding a recipe that like works, and kind of being like that solid restaurant that you go to. Like the reason you go to the restaurant that you love to go to is because like, you know, you're going to get the same experience every single time. You can guarantee the experience. And that is what I did with my readings. Like I can guarantee the same experience every single time because I'm following a very specific, I'm following a very
Kim's like bread
specific
and butter.
recipe. Yeah, like I'm following a very specific recipe that like I created and that I tweaked and whatever. So the proof was in the pudding. People started to come my way and ask me to teach them. And I was not, I always say that Soul Teacher and Soul Reading Method, which is the same program, they created me. Like the teacher that I am today is because of the program. They asked me to teach before I was ready. And Abby will tell you that because she was in one of my early programs and it was a shit show. Yep. And they were so generous.
And I told her about it, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, I mean, listen, we still get that. I'm like 9 classes in and there's always like something to tweak. But I think when you realize that the tweak, like, thank God I had already tweaked the reading. So a lot of the things that happened in Soul Teacher, it was a little overwhelming because I had like all these people that were paying me money and they were there. And it was like it was definitely overwhelming. But I did learn that the feedback was not like personal. It wasn't like I was bad. It was really all the early students should have like stock in the program because they really were the ones that like built what we have today. It's been a community effort from the very beginning. And so I think like I started off myself, like professionalizing the readings, but then I would say that once you get into like a group offer, it's the community that helps you professionalize like the next thing. If you're willing to listen, if you are like able to get past like how hard it is to hear bad feedback, like how difficult. And like Abby said, like Abby and I's relationship was not rainbows and butterflies. Like she was unhappy with a lot of the things. I had to like work. She was a diva of a student, as you could imagine. I had to like work on her harder, you know, and we could have given up. We could have been like, fuck you, like sorry to both of you. Like we could have both said that. But like we didn't, and we both, because she had to work too, like to kind of, you know, tweak whatever was within her, and I had to tweak the program and me as a teacher And that is like, once you get past something like that and you realize that it's not personal, and as long as you believe in the product, like you can make it so much better with the help of like loving people that come your way. And I've been so blessed with like very loving people. And I think that's because I give that out. Um, there's always an asshole everywhere, you know, every once in a while, and the things that you sell as a business owner. But you ultimately get to that place of like, oh, that's not about me, like that's not for me. But then also, I think there's a super magical place as a business owner where you can be like, good feedback, not about me. When you're able to separate those things, that's actually when, because you're working two things at the same time. You're working a product and making a product like really great, and you're making a great leader at the same time. So you're kind of having to like receive the feedback and realizing what feedback is for the product, what feedback is for the leader, what is projection, what's not about the product, and what's not about you. And like as you split that, you're like chilling. That's where the magic is at. So the professionalization, you know, to kind of circle back, Abby, like came from the tweaking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just writing something down because as you were speaking, I'm like getting all these things. I was like, we need to talk about this. So I wanted to write down the first one that came down because I was like, we got to talk about this. But you mentioned something there at the end that I also want to touch on. And you guys, I need everybody to like hear this because it's something that I think not enough of us pay attention to. Is if you run into somebody who is um trigger isn't necessarily the right word because I wouldn't say that Nikki triggered me. I think what
Challenging, yeah, like
yeah,
challenging, you know.
yeah, whether it's them as a teacher or leader, or whether it's like circumstance around the product that they're offering. The thing that I have learned is, and I've paid a lot of people like help me in various ways. And I have found that the teachers, the leaders who have challenged me, who have made me feel some sort of a way enough that I get pissy, that's the nice way of saying it, that I then go to them and I either say, you're really making me pissy, or I just like get in their email and I never write quite stop. I know, or like I just butt heads. Like that's the other way. Like sometimes I just butt heads. Um, I know that they're the ones that are meant for me. And that's not for everybody. I shouldn't say that it's for everybody, but I should say that it like this, that if you are coming up against that, if you have found that, pay attention to it. Really like lean into it a little bit. See, is this like it's a toxic environment, or is there something to mine here? Because all of my best teachers, all of my best leaders, the people that I keep in my life. I mean, Nikki knows I don't leave her alone ever. Like I got her on here, and it's been years since I took Soul Teacher, or Soul Reading Method. Years, guys, at this point. God, like 4 years. It's like it's before the pandemic. So like a long ass time, and I'm still bugging her. Um, and it's a symbiotic relationship. We made each other better. I mean, she was always there to help get me to check myself, and of course, as she said, like the feedback that I was able to give was allowed her to be able to professionalize a product and really bring to the forefront a product that has been incredibly valuable to hundreds of probably thousands of people at this point now. So lean into it a little bit. Those leaders that bug you, they're probably gold. They're probably gold. Um,
And
But I do
Abby,
want
when
to,
you are the person, when you have a triggering student that comes your way and is the diva, I would love to be the first phone call, like just so I can like laugh a little bit. Like I'm not going to be kind like right away. I'm just going to kind of like giggle and make fun of you first, and then I will support you. But like, I would like to be the first phone
absolutely
call,
do
please.
that. Yeah, I will absolutely do that. Oh, kids, you deserve it. Honestly, it's great. Every teacher I have ever like come butted heads against, they're like my favorite teachers. They're like I call them my moms. I like, yeah, like I have so many examples of this. Um, but yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to bring up from what you were saying is that pro athlete comment that you made, or metaphor that you made of like pro athletes work at it. They probably have some sort of natural like ability. And what it reminded me of was the idea of soul contracts. So obviously, like we're talking about this not just for the like let's give business and leadership advice, but also about how does this play in our like destiny or our fate or our like what did we as souls choose for ourselves and write down that these are the lessons that we're going to learn or that we want to learn because this is what moves our soul forward. And I wanted to ask you, Nikki, do you feel like the inner soul contracts, like, or like taking yourself or like a professional athlete who's got this one almost like inclination or natural ability, and that them working at it, them feeling the need to work at it, do you think that that is kind of somebody's trigger for, oh, this is on my soul contract, and this, whether it's to start a business or whatever, could be a link?
Yeah. So I love that question. I believe that based off like all the people I've read and kind of obsessing over soul contracts and paths, and that's definitely like my work. That destiny, which I think is this feeling of like, and it's this feeling of like I'm like living into my destiny. I'm like living my true path or whatever. And I think we're all, of course, we're all seeking that. We really want, and there's that aspect of what Kim was saying that destiny can sometimes feel like, oh, then it should be easy and like there should be luck and all these kind of things, and that's where we get a little screwy. But destiny to me truly is a door. It's like it's a window of opportunity. It's a door that you could walk through. And once you walk through it and you start to like actually help create that destiny or whatever, but destiny alone is not the answer. So to me, the door that like opened for me was, hey, you can do this thing called readings and seems like you're really like interested in it. And then I think that when I walked through the door and I like followed that enough, then after destiny to me is really or really like that potential becomes like realized when you start actually like living and working into it and massaging it and like making it happen basically. So if not, it's just like raw potential, right? And then but you have to kind of like walk through that door. And I do feel that like, yeah, as for like your soul's contract, your soul's purpose, I was very hard. I was very hard on myself because growing up, because I did not know what I wanted to do for a living. My brothers always knew they were going to be doctors, and like that was not going to be the case for me because I wasn't good at science, or didn't. I would say I wasn't good at it, but it wouldn't hold my attention. So once I graduated and I took a few jobs, and I did jump from career to career. I studied publicity, and then I did that for 2 years, and I didn't love the whole world. I moved to writing. I loved writing. I was there, and then all of a sudden, like I lost passion for it, and so it was really like confusing for myself. I'm like, shit, like I don't finish anything, or I don't follow through, and that's kind of like what the feeling felt like. But with time, and as I've read so many people, and like now that I'm 41 and I've been in my career for a while, I do feel that like the things that are like truly for your soul, to some degree, they capture your attention. If Now they will not capture your attention if there's very, very heavy self-doubt, and there's very, very heavy like like a lack of self-love and a lack of like self-worth. Like if that is there, then this doesn't really like fully, this is not really like the answer. But if you can follow, like if you find something that's like you're curious about and it's like, oh, I don't know, like I'm just curious and I keep following it, those are the things that are typically in a person's contract. And then of course it's like up to them to then put in the work that comes along with the curiosity. And of course, like if you're feeling like, man, like I don't know what any of that is for me, or I get sparks of curiosity, but I never stick to it, I never follow through, I would then ask yourself two things. Is it like, okay, fine, it's not catching your attention enough. Science did not catch my attention enough. Wasn't meant to be a doctor. Or is it, I am like drowning in self-doubt and like lack of self-worth, and maybe I should work on that first, like develop that first, so then I feel brave enough to follow the things that make me feel curious, so that I could live into my soul's path, because like it's on the other side of your curiosity and your attention. But it's hard if like there's a lot of self-doubt.
Kim, using that sort of definition, where do you find yourself in that?
I love this because literally, as you were talking, it's like, Abigail, like I'm the queen of there are 2 truths, there are 10 truths, there are so many truths in everything, right? And so when you were talking, Nikki, I was like 100%, like I hear exactly what you're saying. For me, and I'll speak into this because I think like that'll paint the picture of this. For me, when I was in my previous career, I got to a point where it became easy, like so easy. It was a well-oiled machine. I could guarantee like a $250,000 a year. I literally had no more physical space to keep expanding and growing. And I was sitting there like, is this it? I am like 28 years old. This is it. And I can remember saying to a staff member there, I don't think there's anything left here for me to learn. And most people, that's not a question or a care that they have. They don't care if they're learning or doing things in their job. They don't care if they're trying to reach a higher potential or like this expansion. They're just moving through life. And so that to me was an indicator in that moment that it was destiny, right? Like, and it piqued my interest, but I, much like you were just talking about, I had no self-concept. I had a really rough childhood. And so I had no self-esteem, even though I was completely killing it. They literally called me the fearless leader there. Like that was it. I didn't believe any of that. And so in that moment, when I had this desire to go try something, to even explore the idea of going to apply somewhere else, I didn't even think I was worthy of that. Like I had resorted to the fact that this is where I'm going to be. And then it was like, this is where the other truth I believe sometimes comes in too, because this is that moment for me where I didn't choose this path. Like I didn't consciously choose it. Quite literally in that moment, like the universe pushed my ass, right? Like that was the moment where it was like, okay, honey, you're going and you're going to have to lay yourself off and your entire team and everything that you built like the whole thing. And it was that moment that like, I lost my identity. I literally was like, who the fuck am I? Enter every single spiritual awakening we've all been through. And I sat in that moment like, okay, what am I going to do? And much like you, Nikki, in this moment, I went and sought out a support from an Akashic Records reader. And I got my records read, and she was like, girlfriend, like you have been a coach. That's not what they've called it, but you've been a coach in every single lifetime. Like that is who you are. That is what you do. And she was like, this is how funny this is, you guys. She was like, you should become a coach. And I literally was like a gym coach. Because I didn't know the coaching industry existed. I didn't know it existed. And so in that moment, I started to follow this path. I walked through the gateway. I trusted myself. I said to my husband, this is it. We're going to do this. And he was, oh my God, thank Jesus for this man, because he has absolutely supported me and held me up in all the times that I thought that I couldn't get anywhere, that it wasn't going to happen, but like in the same breath, he was like, you followed it. We're going, keep going, and I kept following it. And it was,
doesn't it? Because this is why I have these two on. They're similar but different. Sorry, I can't go on.
Yes. And so like, that's where in this moment, it was like, much like you said, some of the language that I kind of use from a spiritual perspective is sometimes we have to find out what isn't to find out what is. And so as I was going on this journey, it was like, well, obviously I'm a coach. Like what type of coach am I? I just went through the spiritual awakening. I've been doing this work for so long and da 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 da. Okay, I'm going to do a spiritual life coach. And I started doing that and I started working with clients and I loved it. And like, truth be told, like month one, I had a $20,000 cash in hand month. And that was mind blowing. And because of all that work that I still needed to do, my nervous system shut down for 12 weeks after receiving that. It was awful. I was crying every day. I felt like I was an imposter. There was no way I could serve people. I felt like a fraud, like all of these things. And then I decided, no, Kim, let's pick ourselves back up, right? And then we sat there and it was like, okay, I can hone my skill here. I can hone it. But regardless, the results that were coming, I was like, I can't deny that my actual skill set is more oriented in business and leadership than it is in like healing and spiritual life coaching. That's the truth of it. Like, are all those components still very much a part of my coaching? Yes. Like, yes. All my people are very woo people. Yes. So it all is alive and well in that space. However, I sat there and I realized it was like, Kim, like you get activated. The language I use is turned on. I get turned on learning business strategies. I get activated learning new ideas of how to grow a business, of what profitable pathways are and how to help people. Like I can't help but want to like dive into the boring shit that nobody wants to read about. And so it was like that moment of realizing like, okay, so the gateway was coach. You went in and you tried out the spiritual life coaching, you did the one-to-ones, you did the groups, you did all this. And honestly, Abigail obviously knows this, I had a business partner. I was in relationship with a business partner the whole time. And then it was like, we're going to pivot. And once we pivoted into business coaching, slowly but surely, that's where my business partner started to not see herself, because that wasn't always her. She was my right hand woman, legitimately, like helped me make every decision and do all these things and was privy to so much. But that's where she started to lose sight of herself. And so eventually it was like, okay, we had built up a brand of 46,000 followers. We had done it all. And I was like, we're going to burn that to the ground. I'll start a new brand. I'm not worried. I know what I'm doing. I believe in my work. I believe in helping people. I trust myself. Let's fucking go. And so literally that was in September. And so that's the thing, is like, for me, when I look at it from a soul contract destiny level, yeah, it's like all these little moments of really deepening our relationship to ourselves and who we decide we want to be. And I uncovered that a little bit in my first career. I uncovered that more in my spiritual awakening. I uncovered that more in the spiritual life coaching. And man, like there were more tears shed in that spiritual awakening and spiritual life coaching era of my life than I've ever cried in the totality of my entire life, right? Like entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. That is the truth of it. But it is for the people who are, in my eyes, soul driven. Like if you can't help but feel a call or hear something, or a desire is so deep within you, it just keeps coming up. That to me is an indicator that that timeline or that reality is available to you. It's completely available to you. Does that mean, like we were saying, does that mean it's going to be easy? No. Does that mean that there aren't going to be things thrown in your way? You're going to have these energetic boulders that you have to work through all the time? Yeah, like all of that's going to be there, but it's that end desire to like reach that space. It's like peak potential, really. It's like this your highest potential, but not in this hustle drive, like, oh, I got to get my peak potential, peak performance. Like it literally is like, I can see the finish line there, and it's not a finish line, but it feels good to arrive at that point. And so that's what I'm moving towards, is moving towards this finish line. That's just one more stop on an infinite finish line, right? Like that's sort of how I perceive it. And throughout my life, I've had these moments where it's clear as day that I listened, or I heard it and I stopped. I heard it and I pulled back. And then eventually the universe was like, all right, bitch, you're gone. You're going. And that was that moment for me that completely changed my life. The hardest moment of my life, absolutely. But also it was like the biggest wake up call, and the moment where I felt more aligned and more myself than I've ever felt. And now I'm just continuously deepening that in my work, deepening that in my message and how I show up in my own energy and my thought leadership. Like that's where I'm at now. And so I guess like anybody that's really listening to this, like the truth is you're going to have these moments where you want to waver, where you want to fall, where you want to just throw in the towel. But I think this statistic is helpful. In business in general, it is considered a win if you win 60% of the time.
Which sounds crazy.
40, right? 40,
that sounds crazy.
40% of the time, the most successful entrepreneurs, 40% of the time are not succeeding, and they just simply view it as a lesson, and that's it. And it's literally like, it's not intuitive to think that you can fail almost 50% of the time, but still be succeeding. And I think like that's the space, that's that energy to hold that duality, to hold both of those realities in your body at the exact same time and feel into the expansive nature of that. Like, because the truth is like, if it is equal parts, then a failure never really is a failure, because it's always going to come after, or something's always going to come after it. What's going to come after it? Probably that win, right? And so it's just like living in that space of like, this is entrepreneurship. I'm not doing it for the entrepreneur journey. I'm doing it for something so much bigger than me. And that's that alignment. It's that calling. It's that drive that I couldn't try to articulate or put it in a box in any way, shape, or form. But I'll keep moving towards it because I know that that's my truth. I know that that's where I need to go.
Yes. Nikki, you absolutely have been on this, not a similar journey from like what Kim is saying, but I definitely I know your story. I don't know. I mean, you've talked a little bit about your story, about how you started with a career in film, and I know Refinery 29 and all of these other areas, the blogging, the starting to write, deciding to leave writing, coming back to writing eventually after you found reading, that tweaked it and started your own. But you worked in your husband's business, you managed your husband's business, like kept it off the ground for years until you were like, okay, can't do this anymore. Like there were so many of those start and stop moments for you. Thinking about your soul contract and understanding that business is definitely a part of your contract, probably in a variety of ways. Where for you was this hardest part, those like stickiest lesson that is on your contract that you're like, okay, we gotta learn this. And like, I mean, because there's gotta be something, right? I mean, I would say you probably wouldn't be transitioning so much if it weren't there, right? Or am I completely off the mark there?
Yeah, no, no, thank you for the question. I'm gonna like answer that by like explaining something first that I've learned from the readings, and then I'll go into that. But like, so, I like when we think soul purpose, of course, so many of us like think work, like that's we can thank the like millennials for that, right? Like we introduced this idea of like we have a purpose, and we definitely kind of made that as work. But from a soul level, like it's definitely much wider than that. It's it's a much higher perspective than that's just that. So like to say, I'm sure there was moments in my life where I was like, oh, I'm meant to be a writer, but like that's me as a human, like being very like zoomed in. But if I talk to my soul, like she's, she can see such a higher perspective. She can see the whole path ahead. So she understands that like it is bigger than a writer. But for now, we're going to call herself a writer, and we're going to give her that identity and kind of like let her believe that that's okay, so that she can just do this part of the journey. And then, so like definitely like when you're thinking about like your contract, you have to remember that the soul is not American. It doesn't speak English. Like, it's like, it doesn't like exist in the body. So the terms that like we use is very different than like what the soul, if the soul is the one that's creating the soul's contract before it comes to this lifetime, it is really, it's not a written contract. It's not in English or whatever language it is that we speak. It's energetic, right? So, and it's also like ever evolving, all that stuff. So I think whenever we get like too caught up with like some of the names or the labels, we can get like a little tricky. And as humans, we're always looking for identity, you know, like how Kim was saying that, like when she left her job as the director of that preschool, it's like, oh my God, who am I? And it's like so funny. Like Kim just decided that all she was the director of, like, you know, and we all do that. I remember when I was leaving, being a fashion and beauty editor, my identity was so caught up in that. It was such a fun kind of like flashy, you know, in Miami, I was like running the scene there, as you guys could imagine. And when I was leaving that to run my husband's tree business, like it was very hard because like my identity was off. So, you know, when you kind of realize that identities are important, every once in a while we do need them. Like I need to call myself a mom so that I stay grounded in this job as a mother. I need to call myself a reader so that I like do the time that like my soul is like, hey, you're going to read a lot of people in a matter of X amount of years, and you're going to call yourself a reader, and you're going to use that identity. So identities are helpful to really ground us. But as the contract starts to talk to us and say like, okay, hey, promotion time, it's time to move to the next thing, identities become the worst thing, because it's very hard to move over to the next thing. So it's like you need it sometimes, and then you actually have to like totally let it go as you move through your contract. And Kim, I think you were talking to this, that like, you know, a lot of we come from many generations of just like doing the same job forever, right? Like I'm sure a lot of your parents, I have friends that, you know, their dads were in AT&T. My neighbor retired from AT&T. He's like a 67-year-old guy, and he still wears his AT&T uniform during the day because he gardens now, and he says like gardening is his job, and he still wears his AT&T uniform because that is such a big part of his identity that, like, you know, that's like, he's like, I'm in work mode, I will wear my AT&T uniform. It's hilarious. But
like, I'm doing that with my scrubs in like 5 years. I'm gonna be so upset with myself.
You're like, Nikki just called me out and didn't even know that she called me out. So whatever, it's like it's helpful. But I think the kind of souls that are coming in lately, ourselves, our children, all that, it's just not as linear anymore. So like you have to know that your contract, your purpose is going to be a series of evolutions, and you should see yourself as like your favorite artist, like as Madonna. You know, Madonna has lived how many lives, right? Like how different has every album been? Taylor Swift, the eras, right? That's really a reflection of like how we should see ourselves, that we are like ever evolving creatures, and with that, like the work is going to evolve. I think entrepreneurship is a good choice for a lot of souls nowadays because it's a nice container for all the evolution that happens in a person. So I think that that's like why so many of us are driven to entrepreneurship. If you follow my business, I've had my business, I think, for 12 years. And it might look like, oh wow, Nikki's had her business for 12 years, but if I was in a job, you would think I've changed my job a million times within those 12 years, because all I'm doing is evolving within my company, and it still gets to be called Nikki Novo Co. But I mean, like I used to teach blogging, and then I taught dating and all those kind of things. So in a way, I'm a person that has changed jobs many times, but it doesn't look that way because it's under like the guise of like my business, right? So I think we have to be comfortable with evolving, especially if you're called to entrepreneurship. And that's just a sign that like your soul has a lot to do this lifetime, and entrepreneurship is like kind of broad enough for you to be able to get those things done, because your purpose must be pretty like strong that it needs even the hours of work to be able to like accomplish its purpose. So it's like I like I'm a soul that has like a lot of things to do, and I can't throw away 8 hours of the day to like AT&T, let's say, whatever. Not to say that that's not somebody's purpose, but I need to like really use that time to create something. So that is like why a lot of these kind of souls that are coming in are choosing entrepreneurship. So as for like the hardest like lessons, I mean, ask me what day of the week it is. It's like, maybe ask me what is the hardest lesson of today, because it's all hard. And I always like tell people that are interested in entrepreneurship, I'm like, listen, it's just a different type of hard. My girlfriend is really high up at a big corporate company, and she comes home every day at 7 o'clock, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could like, and she doesn't see her kids, and like, or my sister-in-law who's a plastic surgeon who has a really like intense job, like that like is hard for me. But then my sister-in-law will be like, yeah, right, I think what you do is super hard. Like, she's like, you're always available to your kids, like you're always managing, like you'll work at night if you have to because you're at your kids like play during the day. So it's just a different type of hard, but it just that it feels like the kind of hard that I want to choose. And I would say the hardest thing for me is with my old age. I think it was, and I think as you kind of hit some sort of success, which I have, right? Like, I have already had my albums that have hit. And of course, after you have an album that hits, it's very easy to stay comfortable in like what you're doing. When I was making albums that nobody was listening to anyways, it was really easy for me to know when it was time to like close that and move on to the next thing. But I think that with time, as you get like deeper into your work, it is hard. And I think anybody that maybe had a career, that I know Nicole here, right? Like, you've had a career, and it's hard to, when that career gets kind of comfortable, it's like, it's kind of hard to like close and go to the next thing. And I do feel that that is a hard thing for me often, because like I love my people and I get like attached to service, like serving them that way. But there's always this pool of like, yes, we're here to serve, but first and foremost, you're here to like serve yourself as well. And sometimes, like, when you're really like into the people that you're working with and the people that you love, which is very much like the story of me, when it's time to like move to the next thing, you do feel like you're abandoning them, because you're like, you're changing things, and you might stay somewhere a little bit longer than you're supposed to. And it might be hard to get clarity on the next thing. So to me, in my stage, I find that currently to be the hardest thing, to kind of get out of that comfort zone, because you were trying so hard to make something work, you finally make it work, and now the universe is like, okay, great, promotion time, and you're like, fuck you, it's so comfortable here, like, I worked really damn hard to get here, now you're telling me to like climb another mountain. Like, you just don't expect that, because for a long time you're like looking to just get to the top of the mountain, you get there, and then as a pro athlete, there's only a certain amount of time that I can actually stay at the top of the mountain. I'm ready to get up and hike the next one. But it is hard to like know when it's time to like let something die. And you usually have to let something die when it's at its peak, which is so crazy. Like, you don't, if you're letting something die when it is already dying, like you like messed up, like you really want to leave at a high note. So that has been an interesting challenge lately.
I can't imagine that the idea, especially since you're a mom, because I can understand, like, so many of us will like say like our businesses, our children are our babies, right? Like, we, Kim doesn't have children. Her and I are on the same like wavelength here. We will like we're soul sisters, and that's why we're like this. Our businesses are our baby, and if we have fur babies, that's additional. Like, nieces and nephews, they can come along for the ride, but thank God we get to give them back. That that idea of you, and I know Kim has definitely been in that point. I mean, she already mentioned it, of letting go of her partnership, her business partner, and dropping all of her 46,000 followers, and like tossing the baby out with the bathwater. And you don't want to, but in order for your soul to reach the next evolution, or your consciousness, or if you just want to think about it, your own like physical being, your own personality, wherever you fall on the spiritual spectrum at this point, you gotta watch something die, like you were saying, in order to do it. It's probably in my opinion, one of the hardest lessons that we can write on our soul contract in relation to business. Because I mean, some people think communication is hard. Some people think, leading other people inside of a business is hard. But I'm like, at the end of the day, like, at least for me, those lessons, easy. I would take those any day. Me having to one day say, like, one day, that's already come. Me, like, switching up what, like, my business model looks like and having to now, like, defend that is, like, a huge thing for me. And I was like, nah, I was one of those people that you were talking about of like, I'm gonna get there and I'm just gonna say, like, I already, like, work very hard. I just want to have my time in the sun. My time in the sun is very short-lived, and I'm already moving on to the next thing. There is a question: is there a too old time to become an entrepreneur? Who wants to jump in on this?
I will. There is no too old time, period. Like the truth is like it's less about age and it's more about drive. It's more about desire. It's more about knowing that this is available to you and that you are the type of person that is going to make this happen. That's the energy that you have to be in. It's that knowing that you have to be in. And now obviously like there are smarter ways to grow your business. Like this is the truth of it, right? Like I actually loved when we were talking about this is a lot of my clients will come in and they'll be like, I know I get my people results. Like, I know I do. Like I watch them. They tell me these things. And then they just have no connection to their work. They have no connection to how they get their people results. They haven't paid enough attention or reflected enough on how they get that work in the first place. And so to me, it's like whatever route you go, basically Nikki and I were just saying this, like whatever route you go, like give reverence to every part of that journey, understanding what you're doing at a deeper layer than the surface of like, oh, I'm just trying to make a sale, or I'm trying to get this product out there, or I'm trying to book a client, or whatever it is. Like, go beyond that and really pay attention to how you're going to serve these people, what that looks like, how you can enhance that, how you can articulate that better to your people, and really like sit in that space of like, okay, the deeper that I go into this product, into this space, into this offer, whatever it is, the service, the deeper that I go with understanding that, the closer you're going to be to success, period. Because like that's truly what it is like, like I've said this before, but like I can sell anything to anybody. We are always selling things to people. Abigail, you've probably heard me say this. Like literally one time I was doing a gut health 30-day protocol where it was like no sugar, no gluten, no caffeine, no alcohol. You had to have 30 different plants a week. Like it was tough. There was a lot of toughness. And I like walked into my sister's house and I was radiating. My energy was like, oh, as you can imagine, right? Like it was like, that was like the perfection of a month that I've ever had in my entire life. And everybody was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Tell me what you're doing. And I was like, oh yeah, you want to know? I stopped drinking alcohol. I've had no sugar, no gluten, no dairy, no caffeine, and I feel amazing. Do you want in? And literally everybody was like, can you give me the link? Can you give me the link? I'm in. Like, I will do it. And it was simply because I was speaking at it from a space that they understood, a desire that they understood. That's like when I say like grounding our message, so it's not star tennis, right? So they understood that. And it was so genuine. Like I literally genuinely was like, I want everybody to do this. I didn't know you could feel this good. Like I genuinely think that the whole world should be on a gut health protocol diet. Like that was that moment for me. And so again, though, it was like I had spent time understanding that product. I had spent time understanding the ins and outs, the whys behind it, the science. Like it was an entire investment that I had to spend time in. And I gave it that reverence. And I immediately left that house that day and 4 people bought the damn thing. Like that wasn't even my product, but I sold it. And like, how many times are you talking to a girlfriend or a spouse or a partner or whatever, And you're literally like, oh my God, like my new shampoo, it feels so great. You have to try it. You have to try it. Oh, I got this new cream for my face, and like, oh, it's like velvety butter. Touch my face. Don't you want it? Like, we literally do this all the time. And I always say, like, people who are super spiritual, like have super spiritual businesses, you guys will literally market and sell planet Earth like nobody's business. Like, literally, go outside and ground yourself. Get outside. You just got to go outside. You're like hugging trees. You're showing everybody that this is what you got to do. And it's like you're literally marketing for planet Earth. But like, can you market yourself? Can you market yourself? Like, that's honestly, like, just market yourself. Like, shift your focus away from what planet Earth is going to give you and incorporate how you're going to help them by using planet Earth. You know what I'm saying? And so that to me is like, just from an entrepreneur standpoint, I don't think anybody is too old. You just have to be willing. You have to be willing. And much like Nikki said, and I just talked about this, like 60% of failure. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to try again, to pick yourself up, to say, no matter what, this is where I'm going. Like, this is the end result. I know I'm going to get there. Whatever that road looks like to getting there, it's fine, because I know in the end, this is where I'm arriving and there's no other reality I'm available for. And just keep going. That's the truth.
You bring up a good point, and I want to hear Nikki's perspective on this. Of one of the things that I brought this up in the parented edition, and I feel like it's valid here too. It's something that I say to new nurses when they're coming in, whether they're like student nurses or they're brand new baby nurses straight off the NCLEX. And I'm like, your worst day when you're covered in every conceivable bodily fluid and you've maybe lost a patient, or maybe people were mean to you and you had to go to the bathroom 1,000 times to just like pull yourself together and not cry on the floor, or not start yelling at people in triage. The worst day has to be your best day, because you wouldn't be fulfilled any other way. Nikki, do you believe that this is something that is relevant to business? Because I mean, as we've all said here, entrepreneurship isn't for the faint of heart. So would you agree with that, or do you think that there are caveats to that, and where do you feel like they are, if you do?
No, I mean, gosh, I never thought about it. That's so beautiful. I was so caught up in like how hard being a nurse is when you were telling that story. And Allie, my daughter, wants to study to be a nurse. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like scared for my child who like, wants to do this thing that is so
For my way, I'll scare her straight.
I know, it's so challenging. But I think that's a beautiful perspective. I think I'm gonna like use that myself. Like, definitely, like, kind of, I think that's a good way of like self-mothering yourself through the process. And that's actually like what I was, when I saw Sylvia's question, like, is there a too old time to become an entrepreneur? I was really thinking about the inner mother. And I think that like what you were saying, like you have learned to care for yourself, and that those are things that you tell yourself to be able to get through a hard thing. And I think entrepreneurship at an older age is really kind of like this like inner child desire, like the same way that maybe like when I'm, I don't know, in my mid 40s, I'm like, you know what, I think I'm going to take some acting classes, like, or I'm going to take a writing class, which sounds bizarre, I remember wanting like transitioning to be a writer at 25 and feeling very old, because a lot of the writers and editors I was working with knew they wanted to be writers when they were like 16. So I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't go to school for this and all that. So I mean, I think that feeling happens all the time, but I do feel that like it's a desire that's coming within you. It's a calling that's coming within you. And the most loving thing that you can do for yourself is let yourself like follow this call that's calling you. And the reason that you're starting old or later or too late, whatever it is because the people that raised you probably didn't notice that this was your personality and this is what would have been good for you. Like, I was showing signs of being a writer at 14 years old. I would write like novellas, like I would write like novels. I didn't have a love life because I was like too scared to like date when I was like a teenager, but all my friends had love lives and I would write about their love lives. And then like, I didn't even know my mom was such a snoop, and she was like reading. She knew I was writing these things, and she never stopped to be like, my daughter is a writer. And she missed that. So it was my responsibility in my late 20s to reparent myself and be like, hey, Nikki, I think you're a writer. And yeah, you might be a little older than because writing is something too that like I lost some years. I was trying to get a job with people that were my age, but I just started writing, and these people like went to 4 years of college, even had like grad degrees. So I was like, yeah, late to the game athlete, and it felt really shitty. But it was the most loving thing that I can do for myself. And listen, even as an entrepreneur, Sylvia, you're going to reinvent yourself a million times, right? Like I have already reinvented myself, and every time I reinvent myself, like, and I'm not going to stop. I'm 41. Like I'll probably be reinventing myself in my 60s, my 70s, all that. Like I am not going to be the one wearing the AT&T shirt at the garden. I will be doing something totally different. And I do that because it is my role as like the adult and the mother in my life for myself right now to honor all the truths about me that were missed by my parents. And listen, I have 3 kids, and I'm missing a bunch of their talents for sure. I'm doing my best to spot most of them and guide them, but I'm gonna miss them. And they're gonna be 30 and they're gonna be like, "Hey, mom, you never knew that I was a singer." I was like, "Oh shit, no, totally missed that one." And it's gonna be their responsibility to be like, "I signed up for some singing classes, and I'll go to show up to their singing classes at that age." So I think, Sylvia, from what I'm hearing from you, is that it was missed, that would have been a good gift for you, and that like you have it within you, and that to say that you're too old is really to deny the inner child in you that has so much like more to give. So I think it's the most loving thing that we can do for ourselves, especially as we age.
Any other questions, guys? I know that we go through this, and they're hitting you with like bombshells. I just want to take this moment right now to say, like, if you got any questions about soul contract entrepreneurship, leadership, please throw them in the chats right now, before we um, start to end here, and then we're like racing to like type in our questions, because I hate that when they do that. I like. You tell me now, you're leaving me with 3 seconds to write out a whole paragraph of story. So if you got one, feel free now. One of probably the last questions that we'll get here, just because if there are any questions, we'll be able to answer them. For you guys, we already talked about like the stickiest parts, the meanest parts being an entrepreneur, and like battling your way through that, and the change and all that. For you guys, because as I was saying, the worst day has to be your best day. What for you guys is like the best part about being an entrepreneur? If you have one, I don't want to limit you. So feel free. I'm
Yeah.
going to go first.
I always say this, like part of my work that I'm doing in this lifetime is to be able to celebrate myself to the degree at which I celebrate my clients. Right. So like watching my clients win and have breakthroughs and like the ahas, and especially after like grounding their work. Like I just had a call yesterday with a client. She's been in her business for 12 years. She's wildly successful. It's amazing. But like from a grounded perspective, it's just not there. And so when we sat down, she was like, "Kim, I know you gave me this assignment to figure out my process and to like reflect back, and I just can't do it." And I was like, "Okay, no problem. This is a call. Let's go ahead. Let's flush it out. Let's get to it." And at the end of it, you could, the way that I see it, it's like the way that I see it and I smell it. Okay. So in that moment, I could see that the light came back on in her eyes, and I could smell her conviction in her work growing. And it was like that moment of like, I'm so in my lane. I'm so in my genius. I'm so exactly where I'm supposed to be. And she's mirroring back to me how aligned I am in this moment. And now she gets to go out and really, I use the word reverence all the time, like give her work the reverence it deserved from the beginning. And now she's gonna like explode even more. Like in my eyes, I'm like, she was this successful before, like she's about to go like, I'm so excited. Like I genuinely, it's watching people, and I say win and I say results, and like that's me, but like that's just because I have like very tangible markers, right? Like sometimes results are an objective truth. Sometimes it is how they're subjective. It's based on what that individual is feeling. And so that to me, beyond the money wins, beyond like the success, beyond all that shit, it's seeing them fully come into their own and standing in that with deeper conviction than they've ever stood. Like, geez, does that feel so good in my body? So good.
Miss Nikki.
There's so many things that I love about entrepreneurship, but maybe some of you have heard me talk about this before, and it gets me like very emotional. But you know, I was raised by a very bitter mother. You know, she was very smart, very capable, and in her era, it was either you stay home with kids or you work, and you're out all day. And my dad is a physician, and she's definitely the smarter one in the relationship, right? And she made the sacrifice of being like, no, you know, like I want to be with my kids. And she made that decision, but she was always bitter about it. You know, she really raised us like kind of like just feeling like she did not live into her full potential. And I grew up around that. And I remember being like, that's not going to be me. Like, I am going to find a way to do both and be both. So, entrepreneurship, when like, and just technology in general, which is why I've always been like really into technology, is it allows me to do both. And I'm just like eternally grateful for that. Like, I can be fulfilled personally and be the kind of mom that I want to be. It's like, man, like I am just so grateful for that. And as an artist, because like at my core, I'm like an artist and creative, and you know, that's like, you know, performer, all those kind of things. It also, you know, gives me space to do things the way that I want to do them. And it's like really a form of like self-love for me, is to like, because I've had really great jobs, but I've always had to leave pieces of myself behind to be able to be good at those jobs. And in this job, like I don't have to leave any pieces behind. On the contrary, I see way too many pieces of myself. When you're an entrepreneur, you see all the pieces and you're like, can we like compartmentalize this one? Like, we don't need this one in here. But you know, it's the fullness of me that's allowed to come into this business. And so to me, it's like just a form of self-love. And I'm also just, you know, as you know, I know a lot of people are impressed by like my intuitive gifts and obviously like those abilities, but I also like really love business, and that is it very much like captivates me. And I think business and entrepreneurship is very creative. So I find like that it catches my attention. I'm not bored. I get to like, you know, like when you're working a regular job, you know, you have to be very specialized, especially when you're in a corporation. Like, you know, your job, for better or for worse, is very specialized. And like obviously when you run your own business, you wear many hats, some that you don't want to wear. And but I think there's such a good part of that, because like some days that you're like, you know, I really don't want to wear that hat today. Like I just want to do like admin work. And there's days like that for me that I'm like, I just let me pay the taxes and let me like talk to my accountant, because like that's all. Like I don't want to be creative today. Like I don't want to whatever. I don't want to be the podcast host or whatever. So I think that there's a lot of flexibility as to like how you want to show up, and really making it your own. So I feel grateful to be like alive during this time where women and where technology is like where it's at, so that women specifically can really take advantage, and yeah, not have to live so like linearly and stuck in those hours. I don't, oh my gosh, it would just not work for me. So just, yeah.
I love that. Flexibility is one of those things where if you crave it, entrepreneurship can be the best thing for you or the worst thing for you. Sometimes it's like too much flexibility, and I can definitely see how like you got it in spades, where you're able to like take what you built and just like you maximize your flexibility to the max. Like it's a talent that like if you could bottle that and sell it, I would be like grabbing it off the shelf, because I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna do this. Like I work within my confines, but you have so much joy in it, and I'm just like, God damn it, I need a keeper.
Get yourself some kids. Get yourself some kids, and then like you really get serious about your time. You're like, you know, like I have like how many animals, and like 2 that live in my house, like three children. So like you really learn to manage your time, you know. So I'll send you some of my kids, Abby.
Okay, Sylvia asks, I have noticed how the spiritual world entrepreneurship, the spiritual world of entrepreneurship is booming. Is there room for everyone, or could it just become a trend? That's actually a good question. I know that,
Solid question for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I personally, I don't think so. Like, I don't think that, I think entrepreneurship in and of itself is booming. Like, there is a niche and a subset of the spiritual entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship, period. Like, we're in like, I'm sure, like when we zoom out 100 years from now, we're gonna call this period the Great Awakening. 100%. And we're going to look at how many people were leaving their corporate positions, trying to create jobs, trying to create different avenues of income in whatever capacity that they felt called to, in whatever creative endeavor they felt called to. The way that I look at it is, even if I actually like literally have been playing with this thought quite a bit in my head lately, that even if all of us entrepreneurs decided that we were all just going to invest in each other and invest in our courses and invest in our products and in our services, and we were all just exchanging money together, we'd all be winning. Like, that is the truth of it. Even if the rest of the world decides they want to stay in the corporate reality and this is what they're doing and this is how they're making money and that feels great to them, that's awesome. Go for it. We need you too. Maybe. I don't know. AI is a thing. That could become a thing, you know? I don't know. But like
you
from
can
an
move
entrepreneur,
men underground and use them only for breeding. Like, split it. It's fine.
yeah. But like that's where, like, for me, it's like, even if it was just us and it was this industry that we're all in the growth oriented industry, we're all in the healing industry, we're all in the expansion industry, we're in the whether you want to look at it from like, maybe you're a fitness coach, maybe you're somebody that's a nutrition coach, maybe you are a energy reader, maybe you are a brand developer, maybe you are a whatever, like there's so many different avenues here. And the truth is like, when I look at my journey and who I've invested in and what I continue to invest in, one thing I know for sure is I won't quit investing. Like, I will continuously put myself in different spaces that I'm being invited into in that season and that evolution and that standpoint. Sometimes for me, that's been like really spiritual, in-depth programs where it's like, okay, this is what I need right now. This is what my body is craving. This is what my soul is craving. I'm going to invest in that. In other seasons, it's like, oh God, no, girl, we got to invest in our business right in this moment. Like, this is the next avenue. So we're going to go down that route. But then there are other times where, like right now, I'm literally actively scoping out the internet, trying to find my next coach that's not my business coach, that's a different type of coach that can just essentially hold me to living my best life in every area of my life. Like, if we all, worst case scenario, we were only the consumers that were available, cool thing is we all know the power in investing in ourselves. And we all know that that's what I want to do. That's how I'm choosing to grow, and that's how I'm choosing to expand. And so I don't personally think that it's a trend. I think that there are people in the industry who won't stay in the industry. And maybe it's a moment in their evolution for them. And maybe it was a trend for them. But I believe that the people that are really truly in this for the long haul, they're not going to stop. We're just not going to stop. You can't stop. Like, much like Nikki was saying, like, you get to this next space, you get to this mountain, and it's either you, the universe, something is now telling you, like, we're going next. We're going to the next thing. Abigail, like, we've talked so many times about how, like, we're never stopping this growth. We're never stopping this expansion. And so I think, like, that's the key here is one, understanding a competitive advantage that you have, how you're unique, how your product or how your service is literally the best thing for your target demographic, for your ideal client. Like, it is the best thing for them. It's the next best thing. If you can hone in and create that, whatever that looks like, and that could be, it could literally be anything. There are people that do it in courses, they do it in one-to-one readings, they do it in long-term coaching, they do it in digital products, like whatever it is, and whatever avenue you feel called towards, as long as that product is developed enough, you've given it enough time and reflection so that we know this is a rock solid offer, this is a rock solid product. As long as you have that, it's all, people are always going to be consuming. People are always going to be purchasing. That's not going away. And even if the whole world doesn't move to entrepreneurship, people are literally buying things every single day. Why is your product or your service any different?
Exactly.
Kim, I love that perspective of like, if we just like buy from each other, we're like good, because there is a lot of talk about the coaching industry that it's like just a pyramid scheme, you know, that like we're just kind of like selling to each other. And I'm like, oh God, like I've definitely heard that before. But I think, I mean, to that point, it's like, and so what, you know, like even if it looks like that, it's a group of people that are interested in this this like growth path. So I thought, like, so I just enjoyed that perspective. So thank you. Who was it that asked this? Sylvia, you were the one that question. Okay. So as somebody who like, I don't really consider myself a coach. I'm like a you know, really like a practitioner just on steroids, obviously like a very successful practitioner, but you might as well see me as like the doctor that you're going to that like works in an office. That's really pretty much kind of what I am. And I've thought about this question before because I train so many young healers who have like dreams of becoming to doing this work full time, and I hold that very seriously, and I don't want to like mislead people and be like, oh my gosh, I'm training these people, are they going to be able to like get a job, are they going to be able to make it? And obviously my training is not about making it, my training is really just the training, but I still, you know, worry about whether like it's a scam, you know. So I've thought about this a lot, and I've seen so many students and thought about this. And Sylvia, I believe that like the industry, especially like for practitioners and healers, you want to look at all of us collectively as like an army. So I've never been in the army, but I know that there's ranks, right? Like when you first start off, you're on the ground and you're fighting like the good fight. And that was me doing readings 5 a day for $80, back to back to back to back. I obviously don't operate that way anymore because my expertise is needed somewhere else. So like now I'm training and I'm doing less of the readings and I'm like more up, you know, like I'm kind of pulling back. But that also makes room for all the different like healers that are supposed that like then take that place. So there is a lot of like promotions and kind of like moving up, and we it's such a big war that we're fighting. There is such a need for healing, and that we're all doing it together. So we're not really like competitors, we're more like colleagues, and we all like kind of move because, and sometimes people just get burnt out. It's just like nursing, right? It's like you have to have a lot of compassion, and there's a lot of burnout in the industry. So if I need to take a year off, but I know that Abby is like doing the good work, like I can take a year off and like know that there's all these people that I've trained that are going to like continue the work that I started years ago. So that's definitely like, that's like very important to understand that there's a constant like transition in the space. Also, I would say from being in a space early and like kind of where we are right now, I mean, it's amazing to me how much like the industry has grown and how it just continues to grow. Like people that you would never think are interested in this kind of work are waking up to it. And I find that like spiritual, whether it's healing, energy work, intuitive readings, like anything in that space has actually become part of people's holistic kind of toolbox. Like people are no longer just going to the doctor. Like if I had like these bumps on my like my skin on my breast the other day, and of course I'm going to I'm going to my doctor. I went to my doctor and he's, you know, we did all the tests and it wasn't anything scary. And then of course I went to the dermatologist because it's like a skin thing. But I also went to Lindsay Walker, who was trained under me, who does these like body scans and these healings. I also went to like an energy healer that I know. So people, the way people are approaching healing, and we see this in the medical industry, is becoming much more holistic. And pretty much like most people, even the people you wouldn't expect, I'm reading like tech executives and huge investors and like these people that you would never think would want anything to do with like our space. And it's because I'm part of their toolkit. I have this, one of my favorite clients is like a really big guy in Wall Street, and I'm on his calendar every quarter. Like he's like my quarterly meeting with my spiritual advisor is like the way that he calls it. And I mean, it's not like he's going around telling people that he's doing this. He's actually like really into his church and all those things. But I've become part of like his success toolkit. So as millennials get older, they're the ones that just know that this is about that, and then they're bringing their kids to these people. So our kids, like my children, as they get older, when they have their own issues, they know that they're going to see probably 3 people for the same issue. So we're not really competing. We're actually all working together because we're taking more of a holistic approach, because we're not putting like all our eggs in one basket anymore. So it's still a growing industry.
All right, guys, we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining me, and Kim and Nikki. You guys have just been so amazing. I could squish your faces. I love you guys so much. The work that you guys do is so profound and so necessary and needed. And just the wisdom that you guys have dropped here today is going to resonate for many, many years to come. And I'm so excited to be able to offer this to everybody. And all of the links and ways to work with these lovely ladies and any panelists is in all of the show notes. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining me. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I just can't tell you how much I love you. Thank you. But join us tomorrow, and we will be doing the mental health edition.